Hello, and welcome back for part 3 of Close the Garden Gate. We began in part 1 learning how communities of life evolved on our planet and how invasive plants can disrupt relationships, causing harm to our environment, economies, and society. In part 2, we discussed the need to educate, regulate, and mitigate. So let's now look at some concrete examples of how we can do just that. There are many invasive plants we could discuss. For instance, the map in the upper right highlights some high priority invasive shrubs that are threatening northeast forests. Plants like buckthorn in red, barberry in blue, autumn olive, burning bush, common euonymus, Amur honeysuckle, and privet. But these are all examples of plants that have rippled out of gardens and are causing harm to forests and ecosystems. But let's focus just on Japanese barberry for now. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, in the United States, has assessed Japanese barberry as a high-risk invasive species for all 50 states. And that risk extends here in Canada. In fact, climate projections indicate the problem will increase in Canada as the plant moves northward. The story of barberry is an interesting one, because it was once prohibited in Canada because it carries a disease that infects grains. But lobbying from the nursery trades meant that rust-resistant cultivars were permitted. Unfortunately, it turns out that not only are those offspring not rust-resistant, but those barberry babies do not stay in the gardens where they were planted. They are spreading and threaten grain production and much more. Studies show infestations are reducing plant and animal diversity. It is clear that barberry has both detrimental ecological and economic impacts. But an impact not so widely recognized is that barberry thickets increase deer tick populations. They raise the risk of Lyme disease. In the lower right is a photo of a forest infested with barberry and ticks in Lyme, Connecticut, where the connection with the disease first became prominent. Because of the many known harms caused by Japanese barberry, many U.S. states now prohibit the sale. And we hope by sharing this story, more will follow along with Canadian provinces and territories. Let's look at an aquatic ornamental plant for an example, like water hyacinths. This popular ornamental pond plant has all the traits of an invasive species. Offshoots spread rapidly. The seeds are dispersed along waterways and long distances by migratory birds. And today it is spreading in 50 countries where it's considered invasive and across 5 continents. Water hyacinths is a striking example of the harm invasive plants can cause. It alters the physical and chemical properties of water, impairs water flow, clogs irrigation channels, reduces fishing and recreation, and can foster mosquito breeding. In the United States, regulation is patchy, but a lot of states are now regulating it. And here in Canada, despite being assessed as high risk by our Department of Fisheries and Oceans, only Manitoba currently restricts its sale and warns the public of the risk. When we gardeners understand the potential harms of invasive plants like these, most of us, will make different choices. We'll work to remove invasive species from our gardens and look for alternatives. These individual decisions matter. Every action adds up. So we need to learn more about what might be invasive. Unfortunately, few ornamentals are federally or regionally regulated. But if you visit our CIPR website, you can find some regional invasive plant lists that have been developed by experts in the field, from invasive plant councils and risk networks to regulatory authorities. However, it falls largely on us as consumers to verify that plants in our gardens or at the nurseries are safe. Before you add a new plant to your garden, check if it is potentially invasive. Type the botanical name plus the word invasive into a search engine. This should bring up fact sheets, government warnings, or risk assessments if the plant is known to have invasive traits. It won't catch them all, but it's a simple and quick step that can help prevent unintentional harm. If a plant is flagged as invasive, look for alternatives. Around the globe, groups are developing grow me instead guides. So look for these in your area. Get involved. Help share your ideas for non-invasive alternatives. When the solutions are easy to find, it's easier for people to do the right thing. And as more and more of us start making alternate choices and requesting plants that support native biodiversity, the momentum for systemic change in the nursery trades will grow. That momentum can lead to needed legislative change as well. When invasive plants are recognized as a shared problem with shared costs, governments and industry will feel the pressure to act. In response to such pressures, for instance, the state of Maine in the US has developed a clearly regulated do not plant list. They now prohibit the sale of 63 popular ornamental terrestrial plants and another 11 aquatic plants. Other jurisdictions require warning labels on high-risk species. These types of regulatory reforms are moving us in the right direction, and you can help advocate for these kinds of changes. Labeling or outright banning can make the right choice the easy choice. It provides clarity for consumers and a level playing field for plant sellers. Okay, we've talked about education, a little bit about regulation, but now it's time to switch gears because while prevention is always the most effective strategy, we need to face the reality of the problems already on the ground. And how do we deal with them? I won't lie. Invasive plants can be difficult to eradicate, let alone control. It's always best to try and prevent their introduction in the first place. Choose non-invasive plants suited to your site that won't allow them access to grow. When prevention fails, we need to move to early intervention. Try to catch seedlings while they're small using a hoe, hand pulling, or digging. As problems grow, you may need to cut things back, mow, smother, solarize, mulch to limit the spread. Because invasive plants, though, are so pernicious, it usually requires a combination of multiple techniques and often requires the use of herbicides. Think long term. Success comes from steady, repeated effort. It's not ever a quick fix. Knotweeds are an example of how challenging invasive plants can be to control. There are several species and hybrids that spread aggressively through underground rhizomes and resprout when cut. Did you know that knotweed roots can grow 2 to 3 meters deep and spread 10 meters sideways, and even a tiny fragment can regrow? Mowing can actually make problems worse by driving lateral spread. So what do? Well, small patches can be dug out, and if you ever see it, start digging right away. It can sometimes take several years, but it can be done. Long-term success for larger areas covered usually requires a combination of methods: manual removal, smothering, and where permitted, careful use of herbicides, with repeated treatments and monitoring needed. Once you have cut or dug out an invasive plant, careful disposal is important. If plant material isn't handled correctly, it can add to propagule pressure. In other words, it gives species more chances to spread. Improperly discarded material can sprout in new places along transportation corridors, in ditches, or even at landfill sites. That's why we advise gardeners to make sure invasive plant material can't regrow before disposal or transport. For instance, if you can, solarize or bake it in a sealed plastic bag for a few weeks in direct sunlight before sending it to landfill. The key message is simple. Don't let yard waste become the next source of invasion. Now, this photo shows my friend Claudette Sims' garden gate. Claudette and I co-manage CCIPR, the Canadian Coalition for Invasive Plant Regulation, and I am deeply grateful to her for her wisdom and support in shaping this outreach work. Several years ago, she made the commitment to be a role model and close her garden gate to invasive plants. She knew it would be an arduous task, and it has been, but her lived experience reminds us that transitioning away from invasive species, though rarely easy, is possible and really something to rejoice in. The first priority is to prevent spread and contain the problem. Focus on stopping seed production and vegetative spread. Then work from the edges inward. If you have mature invasive trees, consider underplanting with non-invasive species. This way, when you remove the tree, there's something else growing that perhaps can provide the shade or privacy that you need. Always replant promptly. After invasive plants are taken out, this can reduce the chances of reinfestation. And be reminded that monitoring and persistence is necessary because invasive plants can often recur. For those who simply can't part with beloved invasive plant, containment can be a compromise. Grow it in a pot and deadhead faithfully, or keep it indoors as a houseplant. But I want you to think about our choices again. And as I draw this series to a close, I hope you recognize that plant choices exist on a spectrum. From species that are super invaders and harm biodiversity to those that actively support communities of life. There is room in gardens for non-native ornamentals, for food, for shade, for beauty. But our guiding principle should always be do no harm. Some people think the answer to invasive plants is to breed sterile cultivars, but sterility isn't always stable. For example, Amur cork trees that were sold as non-reproductive, well, they've been observed to change sex. Low fertility hybrid butterfly bushes can still transfer genes to wild relatives, and what starts as a trickle of seed can become a flood of future offspring that don't retain the traits of the parent, like the story of Barbary. The point is, sterility is not a guarantee, and traits may not be stable over space and time. Biology has a way of breaking rules, and relying on supposedly sterile cultivars carries risks. Purple loosestrife is a cautionary tale. Here in Canada in the 80s, hybrid cultivars were developed and marketed as safe, but the offspring, though initially few, proved hardier and more vigorous. And rather than preventing spread, they actually helped fuel the invasion of wetlands. It's a clear reminder that so-called safe cultivars can backfire and accelerate invasion rather than stop it. If we truly value biodiversity, native plants must be at the heart of our gardens. Every region has its own unique flora, woven together with the wildlife that depends on it. By celebrating this natural heritage, we can begin to redefine beauty, not through colonial ideals of exotic novelty, but by recognizing the living tapestry of our own ecosystems. When we shift from seeing gardens as mere decoration to seeing them as habitats, we also open doors. Nurseries and growers have a chance to create new markets for regional boutique plants, plants that connect us to place, restore ecological balance, and honor the intrinsic value of nature itself. By redefining the purpose of gardens and opening new markets with native plants, we're not only reshaping garden culture, we're giving our gardens the power to serve as life preservers. It's about slowing the tide of invasive species and giving native life a chance to endure. Invasive-free gardens are gardens for life, living systems that nurture relationships among plants, pollinators, soil, water, and people. They balance human needs with ecological health, and these gardens can still provide beauty and joy. This is a vision of gardening we can all work toward. We don't need capes to be superheroes, but every gardener who chooses alternatives, who shares knowledge, who closes the garden gate to invasive plants is a garden superhero. So thank you for joining me in this Close the Garden Gate series. I believe that together we can make a difference. By preventing the spread of invasive species and re-envisioning gardens to better support biodiversity, we can shift garden culture towards one that better protects and sustains life on our planet. I hope you'll take these ideas forward and share them in your own communities. Bye for now.